Good afternoon, everyone. We'll give you just another minute or so for a few more folks to chime in. And if you're in the webinar already, if you could jump into the chat and just introduce yourself and what organization you're with, that would be greatly appreciated. And we'll start the webinar here in just a minute. All right, folks, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining the latest webinar in our Building the New Forest Future series. My name is Joe Fox. I am the Outdoor Recreation Manager with the Northern Forest Center. And today our topic is winter trail management, responding to user expectations in a changing climate. We selected this topic because outdoor recreation is an increasingly important force in the Northern Forest economy. It is a critical factor in business development, resident quality of life, attracting visitors and visitor spending, and creating vibrant communities. It is also a complex sector impacted by forces ranging from climate change to user trends, visitor patterns, demographics, and community and environmental carrying capacity. These issues and opportunities are in play across the Northern Forest, and we see a lot of value in learning, sharing, and strategies at a regional level. We're pleased to welcome the panelists who are here to join us today. But before I introduce them, a few housekeeping items. Thank you to all of you who are introducing yourselves and the organizations you're with in chat. If you've just signed in, please do that. This session is being recorded and it will be available on our website, northernforest.org. In the coming days, it will also be emailed to folks. We're going to have individual introductions from our three panelists and then a panel discussion. You can post questions at any time. Please post your questions in the question and answer rather than in the chat window. It helps us manage them and keep track of them so we can be sure to field all of your questions. My colleagues Mike Wilson and Isabella Ronson are behind the scenes monitoring questions and comments, and they will feed them to me later in this session. Please feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves again, share resources with the group, etc. So now I am pleased to introduce our panelists. So this slide shows where our panelists are located. I'm going to introduce each of them, and then we'll hear from them individually before going to our panel format. We start with Justin Preisendorfer, who is the leader of the Eastern Region Winter Sports Team at the White Mountain National Forest. We have Dave Harkless, who's a board member of Parker Mountain Trails and the owner of Littleton Bike and Fitness, and Matt Williams, executive director of the Catamount Trail Association. We've asked each of our panelists to provide a brief introduction to themselves and how they became involved in their role to get our conversation going today. Just for fun, we'll follow the path of the sun and go east to west. Justin, I'm going to hand it to you to get us started.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Hello, everybody. My name is Justin Preisendorfer, and I work for the U.S. Forest Service. I'm based out of Campton, New Hampshire, but in my role as the winter sports team leader for the Eastern region, I basically manage our program for ski areas that operate on national forest lands from the lake states over to New Hampshire, Maine, and then down to the mid-Atlantic. I've been working with the Forest Service permanently for 20 years, and how I got into it, recreation. The thing that I seek to manage now is what brought me into it. As a snowboarder, occasional skier and climber, that's what really got me there. Recreating in the White Mountain National Forest, which was close to where I grew up, having some close calls and realizing I needed to up my game if I wanted to stick around and keep enjoying it. I worked for a variety of partners, like the Appalachian Mountain Club, worked as a climbing guide, and then first started with the Forest Service as an avalanche forecaster and a dispersed recreation manager 20 years ago. And so glad to be here with you today. I'll hand it over to Dave.
Hi, my name's Dave Harkless. I am the owner of Littleton Bike and Fitness and also co-chair of the Parker Mountain Trails. How I got started, 1992, I wandered in the door of Littleton Bike and Fitness looking for a part-time job, and I never left. I was a burnt-out chef at the time and was getting into, like Justin, riding, mountain biking, road riding and stuff. And now I've owned my business for 20 years, and we're, very involved in the outdoor recreation in our area. We try our best to support as much as possible. So the Parker Mountain Trails, which is my main thing, they were formed back in the day of don't ask, don't tell, and don't worry. We didn't have anything such as landowner permission or any of that other stuff. That's kind of how it was done back in those days. But we grew up, and now we're celebrating 10 years of being a nonprofit. We're one of the Borderlands collaborators, so we're along with 7 other trail systems working together, absolutely raising the ship. And I was one of the early fat bikers in our area. A friend of mine who helped me out at my business said thought he wanted to get a Surly Pugsley, and I was like, what's that? And he sent me a picture of it, and I'm like, oh, that looks like fun. You get one, I'll get one. And we were off. So originally we were riding some of the snow machine trails, but that got boring pretty quickly. So then we started snowshoeing some of our favorite trails. That took a lot of time, and as you can see the slide now, we've gone over to mechanical grooming, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So a lot of things have happened. So gone from the old school up to the new school, and excited to share this conversation with everybody. And I'll turn it over to Matt.
Hi, my name is Matt Williams. I'm the executive director of the Catamount Trail Association. I live in the Mad River Valley in Vermont and grew up in Vermont. I've been a skier my whole life. I was a alpine skier, Nordic ski racer, and more than anything, just grew up skiing out in my backyard on waxless skis and messing around in the woods. So I'm just feel incredibly lucky to get to play a role now in facilitating, maintaining, stewarding, conserving, and promoting public backcountry ski resources for everyone to get out and use and to promote getting out in the woods in the winter. The Catamount Trail Association was founded in 1984. 3 friends, 2 of them are here in this photo, Ben Rose, Paul Jarris, and Steve Bushy, had this idea. Steve was in grad school at UVM and was a cartographer, map maker, and had this idea to ski the length of the state and put together a route. And they skied it in the winter of '84. It's our 40th anniversary this year, and sort of proved its viability and founded the Catamount Trail Association to establish a version of the route they skied as a permanent public resource. That process of getting permission, signing, building the trail took 25 years or so. And today it's the longest backcountry ski trail in North America. Along the way, backcountry skiing evolved a little bit. Telly gave way to AT skiing, to splitboarding, and the CTA has worked to evolve with the sport. And so 10 years ago, the Ridgeline Outdoor Collective became our first chapter, and we now have 7 chapters in Vermont and northern Massachusetts building and maintaining backcountry ski zones. Brandon Gap was the first of its kind in the country on public land. And we really, at this point, are working to steward, to conserve, and to promote equitable access to backcountry skiing and to mountain lands in Vermont and Northern Mass and the Berkshires, and sort of human powered winter recreation is really what drives us and trying to get people out in the woods and connecting with the landscape.
Thank you all so much for that introduction, and really excited to dive into things and learn more about your winter trails management. Our first question is, since we're getting close to the start of the winter sports season, can you talk about some of the work your organization does in the off seasons to prepare for the winter? And as a follow-up question, has that preparation changed in the past few years as winters have seemed to have gotten weirder? Feel free to jump in any order here.
I'll start off, Joe. So primarily in my current position, we work with both alpine / downhill ski areas as well as Nordic centers. And what people the common misconception is ski areas are quiet during the snowless season, when in reality, when there's snow, that's the busy season. It's not the busy season for customers, but it's the busy season for project work. And so what we see a lot in the off season is the lift replacements, the trail modifications, snowmaking improvements, things like that. You know, occasionally, very occasionally, maybe some terrain expansion. But this time of year, we typically see ski areas, both Nordic and Alpine, kind of racing to finish up those summer projects, whether they're new construction or maintenance. And the capacity that they still have after they implement those maintenance projects are often put into making their trails more conducive for early opening. So trying to kind of smooth out trails, move out, get rid of obstructions like those rocks that are poking up, that when they're gone, you know, they may be able to begin grooming and open the trail with 4 inches of snowfall as opposed to 8. So those are a lot of the modifications that we're seeing in the off season.
Thanks for that, Justin. And for folks that are on the call that may not be aware, can you name some of the ski resorts that you work with, Justin?
Sure. So you know, in the eastern region, Vermont and New Hampshire are really the epicenter of downhill skiing on national forest lands, as well as Nordic skiing. And so in New Hampshire and Vermont, we have a total of 15 areas. I think of those, there are 9 that are downhill. In Vermont, it's Sugarbush, Mount Snow, and Bromley. In New Hampshire, Loon, Waterville Valley, Wildcat, Adaptations. Those are all the downhill. And then some pretty amazing Nordic networks from places like the Reichert Outdoor Center in Vermont, Wild Wings and Prospect, Mountaintop in Vermont, to the Jackson Ski Touring Foundation Network, Bretton Woods Nordic Network, Great Glen Trails, Bear Notch Ski Touring. And those are all the trails that are operated under permit, as opposed to there are many other, like sections of the Catamount Trail that are managed through agreements. And so, you know, as an example, the White Mountain National Forest has 1,600 miles of trail, more than 1,600 miles of trail. And of that, about half are snow-focused trails, whether they're cross-country ski trails or snowmobile trails. So it's a pretty big section of the recreational use. And in the Green Mountain National Forest, downhill skiing is the #1 driver of visitation there. So a lot of people are getting out and enjoying these resources.
Appreciate that, Justin. Thank you. And Matt, how about Catamount Trail Association, kind of off season, or shouldn't say off season, non-snowy season trail preparation?
Yeah. Yeah, similar cycle really to what Justin just described. This is really September through now-ish, early December, whenever the snow flies, is really the busiest time of year for us. It's when we do all the sort of seasonal work. So we have hundreds of volunteers up and down the state on the Catamount Trail, out with chapters and backcountry zones, clearing blowdowns, clearing brush, cutting hobble bush, replacing blazes where they need to, corridor clearing, that sort of thing. We leave that for this time of year. The summer is when we do sort of the bigger projects, bridge replacements, culvert work, drainage work, those sorts of things. And so, talking about how things have changed, that's really the piece that has evolved and changed quite a bit in the last 5-10 years, putting a lot more work into, what you could sort of broadly term climate resiliency efforts, but efforts to manage water better, upsizing bridges. I'm sure we'll sort of talk more about that, but similar goals to what Justin is describing, really making sure that doing what we can. We don't have snowmaking, so doing what we can to make the trail skiable in a broader range of conditions with less snow, make it a little more resilient in those freeze-thaw cycles, things like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Dave.
Yeah, so Parker Mountain Trails, we are by far the little guy in the room here. We have 25 miles of trails. We are a 100% volunteer organization. We do work with grants and stuff like that, so we do hire out to have trail work done, trail building and maintenance done. This time of year, it's with the smaller mountain bike trail associations, the biggest topic is always whether to blow the leaves or not. And our stance is to let the leaves sit and pack them down. It only takes a couple times over with a bike to pack down the trail to see where it is, and actually helping those leaves to break down on our trails, because we always joke about Parker only has about 2 buckets of dirt on the whole mountain. So some organic material is good for us. The other things we're doing is clipping, using volunteers to clip trees back, clean out culverts, making sure bridges are in good shape for the winter time. So we do some volunteer days and stuff like that as we go along. But yeah, it's just kind of ongoing. So we're working on coming up with more detailed maintenance plans, scheduling stuff. Like, I know Justin probably got a really good one. Knows when he has to do which, what, and when, and probably same with Matt with his whole trail system. So we're trying to learn from the big guys and bring our game up, and it seems to be working.
That's awesome. Thank you all so much for that feedback. And I guess kind of staying on this theme of trail work, and keeping with the theme of this webinar. So we're talking more rain, less snow, classic New England ice storm, midwinter thaw events. These things seem to be coming more and more the norm here in New England. Can you describe any changes that you've had to or plan to make to your trails to adapt to these? And Matt, you kind of hinted at, culvert and bridge work, and be interesting to hear from all of you, especially after an incredibly rainy 2023. How have these weather events changed the way you look at the physical infrastructure of your trails? Let's start with Dave this time.
All right. So yeah, I mean, a very wet year. We had for us a pretty good sized project going on that we're trying to get done this year of redoing about 1.5 miles of trail that was from our original days of just basically man-made trails, going through with rake and loppers and kind of creating these little single tracks that just never really happened. So we got the funding to do it, and our trail builder RLA Trails was out there in the rain and trying to suffer through getting it built. And, you know, it was the good thing and a bad thing, because the year prior, we actually built a trail during an extremely dry season. And then when the water did come and the rain did come, we found some issues that we had to go back and remediate. So building during the wet season actually let us know where all the water is going to quickly show up and be there. And so I think all in all, it probably was a little bit harder on their equipment, but I think we ended up with a better product, which we just happened to ride the other day, Joe, didn't we? So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing, adjusting, making the culverts a little bit bigger, and trying to think ahead a little bit as far as where water is going to come from and where it's going to land.
Thank you, Dave. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I sort of alluded to it, but it's been a big push on our end to harden the trail and manage water. Basically, you know, it's a mix of both needing the trail to be skiable and less snow, and just seeing those freeze thaw cycles sort of wreak havoc on it at times during the winter. And so, you know, that looks like a lot of things, but a lot of it is, you know, ditching and water bars and culverts, those sorts of efforts were, you know, when it was laid out, we made an intentional effort as an organization to utilize existing infrastructure. So it utilizes a lot of old logging roads and things like that. And a lot of those, you know, need some work to perform well. And so we're spending a lot of time upgrading old infrastructure that either, you know, just needs to be maintained or wasn't built particularly well the first time around. You know, we're also doing things like upsizing culverts. You know, we worked with the Northern Forest Center this summer on a bridge replacement project where we went from a 30-foot span to a 50-foot span. You know, things like that. As we look at major infrastructure projects, we're certainly looking at upsizing them and thinking about that differently than we would have maybe 10 years ago. So, you know, that's the big focus on the trail for us is a more sort of resilient trail tread. On the uphill side of things, you know, the backcountry zone management is really a new effort. You know, it's only 10 years old that we've really been actively managing for backcountry ski zones, particularly on public land. And so that has evolved. We've worked with the Forest Service. We've worked with Vermont Forest and Parks and Rec to dial in those management strategies. And that has really made a difference, I think, in opening up backcountry ski lines earlier in the season and with less snow. You can go out and ski those. You still have to you got to be careful for sure. But you can be certainly a lot more confident that there's not, you know, something hidden under the snow that's going to snag your tips and send you flying than you would just you know, skiing a naturally occurring or sort of unmanaged line out in the woods, which is, you know, what we were all doing not that long ago. So so those zones have, I think, played a role in expanding the season a little bit for the uphill backcountry side of things.
Yeah, you know, basically just echoing what both Dave and Matt said, water management. Water management is like the pillar of trail management. With winter trail management, it's kind of the double-edged sword because you need water. It is, you know, snow, but when you get too much of it or you get it in the liquid form, it becomes challenging. And so we used to always work with our hydrologists and engineering shop to determine the correct size for any type of water crossing, whether it's a culvert or a bridge. And in the wake of Tropical Storm Irene in 2011, it was really provided some great teachable moments for us to look back and say, okay, all these, you know, pieces of infrastructure that we thought were well designed for their site, they got hammered. What happened? And what it was the amount of floating debris that was in the water. And so our new standard for bridges has been 100-year flood +3, so that when we reach those 100-year levels and the tree comes floating down the river, it doesn't get pinned up against the bridge and then cause a debris jam. We have definitely also seen a shift from open water bars to box culverts, or even more traditional culverts, but typically box culverts for both snowmobile trails and Nordic trails. Because when we have, I mean, I grew up in New Hampshire and I remember January thaws as a kid, but we're now getting the January thaw, a couple February thaws, a March thaw. And if you're operating a Nordic trail system with grooming and people are used to a groomed surface, and a water bar just carried a bunch of, midwinter rain in it, you end up with these little, icy canyons, miniature canyons, but they're big enough to catch a ski tip. And so they require pretty intensive grooming. And what we're seeing more and more, like I said, with both Nordic trails and snowmobile trails, is a change in the type of drainage crossing. So that now with a box culvert, you have a wooden top, sometimes a concrete top, but it's smooth. It's flush with the ground. And when it melts out underneath, you can still ski over the top of it or snowmobile over the top of it without a real safety concern. And then the last layer, just say more, not just bigger, but more drainages. I look at, as a great example, Loon Mountain Resort in New Hampshire, Lincoln, New Hampshire, developed a great bike trail network in their ski area, and it was well designed. All of the water crossings were heavily engineered, but they also provided the builders with a huge stack of culverts, just smaller diameter, and said, hey, whenever you think you might want one of these, fire it in. And that approach of more drainage is better, I think, is really the wave of the future.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Just a real quick reminder to the folks watching here, feel free to fire away questions. We'll try to get to those later here in the webinar. Please use the Q&A instead of the chat. Justin, I just wanted to follow up. I found that 100-year flood level +3 foot interesting, and I'm curious, is that a sort of like an internal in your office standard, or has that turned into a national standard for the National Forest Service?
Right now, I believe it is a standard at our regional level. So the way that the Forest Service is organized, we have all of these, 150 plus, I think 154 national forests scattered around the country. And then we're divided up into 9 geographical zones. And so we're in the eastern region. We are the most water-rich region out of the 10, or 9 rather. And it's something that we're kind of fine-tuning, because it makes sense, especially on some of the bigger waterways. But when you start getting to the smaller streams, they're not, at a 100-year flood stage, they're not going to be carrying trees down them. They're pretty small. So we're Yankees. We need to figure out a solution. And so we're working on the beach ball solution, where we talk about, a foot diameter, 2 foot diameter, 3 foot diameter inflatable beach balls, depending on the size of the stream, the order of stream that we're looking at, and what is really likely for something to be floating down. So it's a work in progress. We have this new kind of field application we're trying to use, and I think it may go national, but we got to fine tune it a little bit more first.
So you all have a lot to manage. You have volunteers to manage, staff to manage, trail networks, communication, and one of the things we see a lot is varying user groups. And I'm curious if you could speak to, have you seen any differences in the types of users on your trails, and particularly as it relates to winter trail use? What kind of conflicts may have or do occur, and what steps do you take to sort of minimize conflict between user groups?
I'll go first because I probably am less on the front lines than Dave and Matt and their associated staff. So, you know, we do manage lots of trails ourselves. We do have lots of trails that are managed with under partnership with a wide variety of organizations, and then we have the trails that are managed under permit by commercial operators. And I would say that, you know, the last 2 years for downhill skiing, the last 2 years have been the biggest ever for the number of skier visits nationally. And some of that, that trend was already in play pre-COVID, but almost every single outdoor activity increased, the participation levels increased during COVID, and the demographics of the user group broadened. And so, you know, we used to be, the overwhelming majority were folks who looked like the four guys on the screen right now. White males, middle-aged, if I can kind of group us in, you know, no offense to anyone who might be at the periphery of that, but you know, we are seeing lots and lots of first-time users, lots of folks who are kind of trying something out and then doing a follow-up, whether, you know, they always rode a bike and now they're looking for something to do in the winter. At COVID, they wanted to exercise, get out with family, and all of a sudden, like, there's an explosion in fat biking of people who never would have thought about biking before. It's been the same way with Nordic skiing and alpine skiing, and it's you know, I'll let these guys talk about managing some of the conflicts, but you know, I want to make sure that we look at the opportunity. Like, all of these new people who are potential advocates for outdoor recreation and management of public lands, we need to embrace them and try and find a way to work with them. So, yeah, Dave, Matt, what do you guys think?
I'll jump in next. So yeah, the Parker trails are right in downtown Littleton. So when during the spring, summer, and fall, we have very little issues. So we have dog walkers, trail runners, mountain bikers. It's a non-motorized trail system. We do allow e-bikes. So, you know, none of those, you know, I mean, there is this thing about etiquette when you come upon somebody walking a dog or something like that, what you should do. But we all kind of get along pretty well. During the wintertime, it's a different thing altogether. So those dog walkers are out there and they got to get their constitutional walking with that dog, and that dog's making them come along. So so then you have this whole thing of, you know, the groomed trails. So they're walking on the groomed trails. So we've been working on it for a couple of years now. We've come up with a pretty good solution of whereas, and there is a slide in there. Somebody in the background can bring it up. There we go. So we have a network where we're actually doing boot-friendly trails, which we're actually grooming them, and we're telling people you can use them no matter what the conditions are. And then once we get beyond that kind of down, you know, right in the center of our network, easy access, we have developed the think before you sink, which has been out there, but we took the signs that we were finding, which were kind of challenging. They were reversed around, so the wrong thing was big and the correct thing was small. So we really wanted to encourage people to do the correct thing. So we made the correct thing big, of, you know, dropping your tire pressure, using the snowshoes. And we put that out there, and that worked out really well for us. So I try to groom the boot-friendly trails maybe a little bit more often if we get some soft conditions. They need a little bit more attention. We thought about just not grooming them, but then people actually really like walking on the groomed trails. And I talked to people out there, users during the wintertime, and some people that are new to our area, like Justin said, coming up into the area due to COVID, working remotely, all of that. And they're like, hey, we got this great corduroy network out there we can just walk on during our break and listen to a podcast. They thought I was actually grooming for them, which I wasn't, but it's okay. So far that's working for us. The other thing we have to do is I have a machine that I groom with when we have more snow. It's called a Snow Dog. And I made a little handmade tiller to go on the back, and that actually does a pretty good job of knocking down the footprints. So trying to stay on top of that.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, certainly agree with, with Justin and David. I mean, we've seen similar, the same rises, growth in usership that everybody else has. And I think, and I'd certainly agree, from our perspective, the upsides, broadening the demographics of the sport, the community building, the relationships, the connections to place in the landscape, that can happen out on trails are things that we really believe in and think are really powerful. And so more people getting out there is great news in our view. That's what we're here to help promote and facilitate. I think from our perspective, the challenge, it's not to say that there aren't user conflicts out there, that they never happen. They certainly do. But they're, I think the bigger challenge for us has just been the broader stewardship messaging. And, some of that is due to people being disrespectful, frankly, and some of it's just due to the sheer volume in places at times. But the conflicts that we've seen that we've really had to focus on and address have been more around relationships with landowners, pressure around parking lots that are in residential areas, trails that go close to people's houses, people speeding up back roads to get to the trailhead early in the morning to, make sure they get a spot so they can get out there. Those sorts of stewardship challenges have been, the bigger, the bigger issue for us. I think, the vast majority of people out there are awesome and are, respectful to other users, to the landscape, to landowners. But of course, it's the few who are, who are not, that, cause a lot of problems and take a lot of time. So, those are the issues that we've been working to address. And so some of that's messaging and network, and some of it is actually sort of addressing infrastructure where we can. But things like parking lots are big projects and take a long time and need some really careful planning. So it's the messaging comes first, and the infrastructure comes with time.
I like that answer, and it's honestly, I feel like most of our user conflicts that we see are they're people who want to do the right thing, but they just don't know what that is. Especially with new users, many of these outdoor pursuits don't have established mentoring pathways. People are getting into some sort of outdoor sport based on whatever their past experience was. And it's I worked as a climbing guide for a number of years, and it was very evident with the birth of climbing gyms that people were going from a climbing gym to outdoor climbing, and they weren't coming through like a backpacking, hiking, hunting, or any of these traditional outdoor pursuits. And so their perspective was really different. And talking to folks at these crags, they thought that there was like a cliff monitor who would come through and, you know, make sure that the little bits of garbage were cleaned up and, you know, take care of the dog poop and whatever. But when you actually explain to folks the reality of the situation, quite often they're like, wow, okay, well, thanks for enlightening me. And I've been a firm believer, like if you can not only increase awareness, but like make those people advocates and want to spread the word, then you generally have much better success, especially when you tie it to the potential ramifications of the community not doing it. That's where like the Vermont Backcountry Ethics or Ski Kind, those type of initiatives really, I feel like can go a long way.
This is great. You guys are kind of beating me to the second part of my next 2-part question here. I'll throw it at you anyway. So with trail conditions, you know, even 50 years ago in New England, they are unpredictable and change, right? The old saying, if you don't like the weather, wait a minute. So with trail conditions changing so frequently, one, how do you communicate trail conditions with users? And then sort of related to that, and you just touched on it a bit, how do you set expectations with users about, you know, acceptable trail etiquette, and what different methods do you use to reach those users and communicate that? Again, it's 2-part. You kind of hit on the second part a little bit, maybe a little bit more specifics about your efforts to reach out. And then I'll have a third part to that question after this. This should be lively. Thank you. Jump in, whoever would
I'll
like
start it off. Yeah, so, you know, one of the things we came upon is, you know, the ride with gratitude, use the trails with gratitude. I got the t-shirt on right here. You know, and you know, we're primarily a mountain bike trail association, but we want all users to feel accepted there. So, you know, us, you know, me and my board, my volunteers, we're trained to be nice to other people that are out there on the trails, getting that up for the other people to, you know, we have some very avid fat bikers that think their trails that we're grooming are just for them, you know, and they're scornful when they see anybody with you know, bare boots on the trail, no matter what the conditions are, even if it's firm enough for bare boots, you know, they're so trying to convert, you know, make those people, just to say, you know, not to down, you know, degrade people, but, you know, encourage them when you see them with the snowshoes on, encourage them when you see them doing the right thing. Possibly, you know, it's like that fine line of, you know, how do you go off and try to explain proper etiquette without talking down to somebody? So a little bit of signage out there, you know, helps a lot, but always promoting it in a positive way. You know, that's the biggest thing that we're trying to do. Don't scream at somebody when they're doing something wrong. That's sometimes you just have to let it roll off your back.
Awesome. And then in terms of changing conditions, is there some kind of, whether it's software or signage or a trailhead that has a conditions posting? How do folks learn about the conditions in the winter on any given day?
All right, I'll finish up on that. Sorry, I forgot about the second part. So we use social media, Facebook. There's a couple of Facebook groups out there. There's a lot of softwares like Trailforks and stuff like that. You know, we're a volunteer organization, so we don't really have time to go in every day and post what the trails are like. But we encourage our users to post what the trail conditions are. So they're good about telling us, you know, if there's a tree down on a certain trail. I'll do grooming, and I tend to record it on Trailforks, and then I take a screenshot of what I just groomed, and I post it a little bit later, shall we say, so we give the trails time to set up, because I've had some people like wait for my screenshot and they run out there right behind me, which is not giving the trails time to set up. So basically using mostly Facebook and a little bit of Instagram.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. And Matt, I know you've got a unique situation with a several 100-mile long trail corridor.
Yeah, we've it's a perennial struggle for us to figure out how to communicate conditions, and we've tried I don't know how many different means to do it. None of them terribly successful. The Catamount Trail itself is 320 miles long, and then there are backcountry zones from the Berkshires to the Northeast Kingdom. So the variety in conditions is pretty significant, and of course they change pretty fast too. So information gets stale pretty quickly, sometimes over the course of a day. And so, we just do a lot of work to set expectations. So it's a backcountry trail. It's not groomed. It's a somewhat unpredictable experience. That's sort of part of the joy and fun in it, but it's the reality, and it can be a challenge. And so, we do our best to connect people through it. We have a really great Facebook group where skiers are communicating and talking about tours and conditions, and people will call the office or email us, and we'll reach out to local volunteers or chapter members in the area that are interested in skiing and get them the best information we can. But a lot of it's that setting of expectations for people around that, and just pointing them to if conditions are sort of we get these periods where it's we get a statewide thaw and then a deep freeze, which seems to happen a lot, or things like that. Pointing them in the direction of a Nordic Center or a section of the vast trail where we're co-located and it gets groomed. Resource places like that where the conditions are a little more, at least the surface is a little more predictable, and so it's easier to navigate in those sorts of conditions. And in terms of the sort of first part of your question and communicating ethics, I feel like it's a full court press for us to try to get the word out sort of however we can. And so we do have tools. Justin mentioned the Vermont Backcountry Ethic, which is sort of a winter and local version of the Leave No Trace ethic. We're communicating through social media, through email lists, through other communications channels, through our membership, trailhead kiosks, all sorts of things. And then we run a lot of tours. We run 100 days worth of free backcountry ski tours every winter. They're led by volunteers, but they're a great opportunity for us to just give people a low pressure opportunity to get out and ski somewhere new with some people that know the area, that have experience backcountry skiing, and to just try to lower those barriers and sort of try to welcome people into the ski community and create some of those pathways and lanterns that Justin was talking about. So we run those all across the state, and we run community ski days that give people the opportunity to get on equipment, and youth programs around the state too that work with over 1,500 kids a winter to get them into the sport. And so we're trying to do reach people in lots of different ways, and really focus on the joys and the benefits of getting outside in the winter, but try to do our part to educate them and give them the tools to do that and have fun in a fun, respectful way, and get the most out of it. So
Appreciate that, Matt. And then I guess Justin, the same kind of question. I understand a lot of the winter recreation areas that you manage are established ski areas that have their own, conditions reporting. But in terms of like snowmobile trail access or some of those managed lands for Nordic skiing, where would folks go to find information there, other than keeping an eye on the weather forecast for the past week and the following week?
Yeah, I think I'll be the first one to tell you that you don't want the federal government being in charge of like information management flow if you want up-to-date conditions. So we really, I mean, with the commercial operators, they've got their stuff, right? All you got to do is go to any ski area and look at their snow report. They're going to maybe have some live cams. They've got, you know, is it open? Is it closed? They'll give you a narrative summary. For us, you know, the non-commercial opportunities, I think the best information comes crowdsourced. Absolutely. If you want to talk about the actual skiing conditions of, you know, backcountry ski trail, getting the reports from recent users is you know, there isn't really much that is going to be better than that. I look, as one example, I look at the Mount Washington Avalanche Center where I started my career. And in 2003, you know, we would issue the avalanche forecast every morning, and we would post it, a physical copy, at 3 places on one side of Mount Washington. And then we would call a phone line and make a recording. And if we were lucky, our dial-up connection from Hermit Lake Cabin halfway up Mount Washington, we'd be able to upload something to the internet, and it would get out, you know, well after any reasonable person would have left the parking lot, you know, to start their day. Today, you know, you can get that avalanche forecast a wide variety of ways. You can get it texted to you automatically every morning. You can access it online, all these places. But you can also go to the Avalanche Center website and you can get reports from, you know, snow observations. You know, somebody was out there, they will tell you what they saw. They try to use standardized language, test procedures to convey, oh, I did a compression test and it failed at tap 13. Like, if you know how to assess snow, you would be able to understand what those results mean. You also now have direct access to so many different types of weather information, both forecasting and then kind of current condition, observer network information, remote sensing data. Like, you can be your own forecaster, and you can really track conditions on a daily basis, even less than that, on an hourly basis. If you look at the Mount Washington Observatory, they have hourly observations from the summit and precip snow or rain summaries every 6 hours. Like, that's all available to the public. And, you know, that information is fantastic as a user to help you, you know, get your expectations lined up with reality. But it also, the availability of it is also a challenge, because the bajillion other people who have an internet connection also have access to find out when that stellar powder day is. And, oh my God, 18 inches of snow fell and there hasn't been any wind. Now is the go time. Everybody sees that information, and that can create some interesting dynamics because of the way that humans play in the same shared space. So, lots of information out there. It's the information age, and we should all be taking advantage.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Very interesting. And I do remember those days of like waiting until 7 a.m. down at Porky Gulch to get the avalanche report off the bulletin board before deciding whether or not to hike up. Interesting. So on a broader topic, a lot of the recreational trails in this region are on land, whether it's private or public land that has long-term forest management plans. So, you know, timber harvest can certainly take place on some of the areas where folks recreate. And I'm curious, you know, how do logging operations affect your recreational activities and access? And how do you communicate what's happening to your users, or like the importance of forestry management with your recreational user groups?
I can jump in. I mean, we that's certainly true for us. You know, we have trail closures on the Catamount Trail every year. We've had backcountry zones closed because of logging operations on national forest land as well. And you know, we do our best to communicate those through the website mostly, so people can sort of be alerted to it as they're planning a trip or a ski. And you know, we really just try to emphasize that, you know, we're a part of a working landscape, and we're reliant on open space, and forestry plays a role in you know, helping to keep land open and keep forest land a viable option, particularly on private land. And so, you know, we're a guest there as much as anything else. And so, you know, we have to sort of we're not the only ones who want to be in the woods, and you know, we got to sort of yield to others sometimes. You know, we have increasingly, I think, gotten some pushback less around the fact that the trail's closed, and more around less around like my experience skiing has been inhibited, more like how can you allow logging to happen on the Catamount Trail. And I think that we just try to communicate more about how, you know, how land ownership and permissions really work, and that we're sort of not the top of the hierarchy there. And you know, we're you know, grateful to be able to use these places, and you know, need to share the landscape with others. So that's sort of been our approach to it. You know, most of the time it's just a year, and then, you know, we can either do a quick temporary reroute, or close it for a year, and then we're back to it. Sometimes it's longer than that. And, you know, I get that's frustrating for people. It's frustrating for us, but it's, you know, we just try to take the long view.
I'm not sure if anyone else wants to comment on that.
Well, we've had some logging happen in our operations, and you know, we're a lot smaller than these other White Mountain National Forest for sure, or Matt's whole trail system. You know, our biggest thing is barrier taping off the areas that are going to be logged, really broadcast it to the users, so there's no user conflict there. And then making sure we have hoping for permission from the landowner to be able to go back in and clean up the tread, you know, and afterwards. So, you know, it's you know, it's just the way we do it. So we really haven't had many issues at all, and the landowners are great to work with. So we're lucky. We're actually very lucky.
It's a huge part of, you know, what we do on the National Forest. You know, the National Forest Reserves were created by law in 1897, and the goal was to protect and improve the condition of these resources while providing a continuous supply of timber to the nation. And so, you know, the Forest Service is seated under the Department of Agriculture, and, you know, especially early on, trees were managed like any other crop. The desire was to grow bigger, more trees and be able to utilize them. And as you know, as time went on, the agency really shifted to a much more of a multiple use management focus. And with projects these days, it's really hard to have a timber project that doesn't impact recreation in some way. And so from the onset, when projects are proposed and then analyzed, made available to the public for comment, we try and minimize as much as possible the impacts on recreation. And so quite often, as we're approving timber sales will put in requirements that, skid trails have to cross snowmobile trails or Nordic trails at right angles, that slash has to be dealt with within X number of feet, that no hauling operations are going on during weekends or holidays. If it's a major route, we look for a relocation. And so really trying to balance, knowing that there's going to be some impact, but trying to minimize it. And then just really hope that at the tail end of the project, what is the condition of the ground after the forestry project is moved out, that actually it's better in some way for the recreation, whether, the road system, the old road system that's used as a trail now has better drainage. Maybe a crossing was improved, sight lines enhanced, something like that for snowmobiling. It's never easy when the negative impact is occurring, but quite often if we take that long view, we're better off in the end.
Awesome. This might be a nuanced question just based on the types of trails you have and the types of users and the season, but what criteria do you use to decide if a trail needs to be closed temporarily, like because of thaw, rain, melt? And again, what kind of feedback do you get? I know some trail networks have seasonal closures. Matt, I know that, part of the Catamount Trail, some is co-located with mountain bike trails, I believe, or may or may not be open to hiking. But are there times other than just a seasonal closure or active logging operation that you've had to close trails due to conditions? And again, how have you communicated those, and is the public respectful of that or not? Mud season's really top of mind for me. And thank you to whomever sent that question along.
I guess I'll start off on it. We don't tend to close our trail system like a lot of people do. Currently, right now, we have a small part of our system that is closed for hunting because of a long-standing agreement between a hunter and a landowner. So we honor that and put up signage, saying such as that, trying to inform the trail users. It'll be interesting to go out and do a trail counter read after hunter season to see if how many people actually listen to that, because we have trail counters now. During the grooming, during the majority of the mountain bike season, we do not shut our trails down. We just promote proper etiquette. We'll say things like, it just rained 3 inches. Maybe you should consider doing something else today. Little things like that. Your dog walkers are going to be out there no matter what. So in the wintertime, that's why we came up with our boot-friendly network, and saying, no matter what the conditions, if it's sloppy and slushy out there, go ahead. And actually, I kind of like it myself because I don't like to be a hypocrite, and I'm walking my dogs out there all the time. So I'm not going to tell everybody else they can't walk their dogs. I'm going to go out and take my dogs for a walk down the trail. So I actually utilize the boot-friendly loop for myself. And then occasionally, if we see like a 3-day warm period coming, I'll go out and on the groom stuff that's outside of that boot network and put up some barrier tape. And sometimes that pisses people off, but more often than not now, we're just trying to make people more aware and then go out and regroom as the conditions allow us to do.
Yeah, we don't do a lot of trail closures, as you mentioned, Joe. For traditionally our trail's been a seasonal trail, and so it's closed when the snow melts in the spring, and doesn't reopen until mid-November, December, if we're lucky, when the snow starts flying in the fall. So in between, typically it's been closed unless it's co-located with another system that sort of has overlapping permissions, and allows year-round use. That's changing a little bit for us as we do more partnership work with mountain bike groups in particular, and the Velomont Trail Project in Vermont and others. And so our messaging is having to get over the next few years will evolve a bit and have to get quite a bit more nuanced. But a lot of frankly, some of the strategy for us has been like a lack of communication, if you will. Like we have made some moves to remove the Catamount Trail from certain mapping systems and things like that to just avoid people stumbling across it. Particularly mountain bikers and gravel riders who are looking to make connections between one network or another, or one town and another, and they sort of see the Catamount Trail on a map and they're like, oh, I can use this. And but actually it's going through a super wet area, or it's going through a farm field, or some other place where it's just not appropriate for people to be in the summer. So we've removed it from some mapping systems to help limit that. Again, it's to a point Justin made earlier, I don't think it's people sort of intentionally doing the wrong thing, and they just they see it on a map and they're like, oh, this looks cool, I'll go check it out. So just trying to limit information in some ways too.
We let the commercial operators open and close their trails as they see fit, but on the trails that are not commercial, they're either ones we manage or they're managed by partners on national forest lands. We don't close them ever, unless there is a very unique and pressing either hazard that's unusual in nature, or there's some level of unacceptable resource damage. But it's really a fundamental shift that the Forest Service made many years ago. And it, to me, one of the really clearest examples that defines that shift was where I started working on Mount Washington, where they used to try and control the people and control the environment. They would say, today is, the avalanche danger is high. The ravine is closed. You cannot go there. And then they try and trigger some avalanches with explosives, shoot the hanging ice that would potentially come down and kill somebody. And you could never make it safe. You could never make it safe. And so what was the appropriate level of hazard reduction? And eventually the agency did a huge pivot and said, we're not going to close things unless they're a really unusual hazard that the typical person would not be able to identify. And we're going to go to education, and we're going to let people make their own decisions, because that sketchy trail that I think should probably be closed, somebody else is like, oh, this is easy, I'll just fly down it and go to the next one. So yeah, we have avoided closures except for when absolutely necessary.
All right, this is a user question that I might slightly change the wording on a little bit, but we've all been talking about, adaptations to recent weather events. In a nutshell, climate resiliency. And the question is essentially, are you using that term with the public? Are in your communications, or whether it's internally in your organization or with the public, are you talking about climate resiliency with trails and the need for infrastructure updates? Or is it more like you're kind of doing it and you don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole? I'm just curious, how forward facing is that logic? And if you want to pass on that, that's fine. Just super curious.
I'll start with that one. We're talking amongst our board members and our volunteers, but not so much out in the public, really. I don't want to get into the climate change argument with anybody. We're just adjusting as necessary. So, as our trail system progresses, we just, need to see what's coming, need to, look forward and adjust. So that's our basic stance on it.
So we're gonna pass on Justin and Matt on that.
No, I can jump in. We certainly, I mean, I think I'd say a few things. One, I think it's, we don't see we're not a political organization. We don't do lobbying, so we're not engaged in that way. But we certainly don't shy away from talking about the work that we're doing and the way that climate change is influencing it, and the framing that we use for a lot of these improvements is climate resiliency. We're not shy about talking about the impacts of climate change on the northern forest and by skiing by extension. It's not sort of the primary purpose of, not front and center in all our messaging or our primary purpose. And I think a big part of what we're trying to do in our messaging is celebrate winter when it's here, and celebrate the joy that brings to so many of us, and to sort of remind people to get out and have fun and enjoy it and connect with it, and that there's still a lot left to fight for if you want to be politically engaged about it. But that we're sort of here to celebrate winter and getting out on the landscape. So that's sort of been our approach to it, and just trying to play our role and be positive in that way.
And for us, as a federal agency, it can be a little bit of a delicate dance, depending what the project is, which administration we're working under at the time, how we talk about projects. The projects we tend to do, they transcend, administrations. And so we may not call it a climate resiliency project, but we're going to still talk about the impacts, the things that are meaningful to the end users. People can relate to the high water events. They can relate to midwinter, unusual severe weather patterns, high intensity storm events. And what that means both for impacts on recreation opportunities, on resources, and on the economy. And those things are all real, and easily, displayed as an example form. When you label it a climate project, sometimes people just turn away from it when they otherwise would be fully supporting. But as soon as you use that C word, all of a sudden people get freaked out. So we approach it with caution, but we have climate adaptation centers in the agency and try and look at everything with a climate lens.
Awesome. Okay, my last question for you before I bring it to open it up to folks to use the question and answers. And again, please start popping your questions in the question and answers. This has been an awesome conversation. What do you see winter trails based recreation looking like? And let's keep it positive. Like 10 years from now, what would you love to see outdoor recreation in the winter in the northern forest look like? Or any predictions you want to throw out?
Well, yeah, I mean,
wishes,
I'll jump
hopes,
in.
dreams.
I mean, I see the mountain bike season extending and the fat bike season compressing. It's, you just have to roll with it. So 10 years from now, I would like to see our trail network progress as it has over the past 10 years. So, growing up a little bit, still doing some trail projects, getting more users out there, but not overcrowding. So to give anybody listening, we have we get about 1,600 to 2,200 trail visits per month. So we're a small system. We have room for growth. So just expanding our capabilities. Some of them more work with adaptive sports, making our trails more accessible to adaptive folks is on our list. So that would be nice to see too. And then my biggest thing is keeping the kids getting into it. So we have a really fun pump track, dirt jump area right at the beginning of our trail system, right around the corner from the parking lot. So seeing that grow with the kids, getting those kids into it, keeping them off those electronic devices all the time, getting them out there and playing and enjoying the outdoors. And that's what I think. That's our general thing, is to kind of be that way, be part of our community, and making it more accessible to everybody.
Thanks, Dave. Matt, projections, hopes, dreams, future of the Catamount Trail, 10 years from now. What are we looking at?
Well, I couldn't agree more with Dave on that. I mean, I don't think that there are like mass, we're chipping away at climate resiliency projects and things like that, but I don't think there's massive changes coming in our approach there. But I think what we're really pushing for, and what we'd like to see over the next 10 years is similar. We have a lot of programs to play our role in doing this, but to continue to push broadening of access to these sports, and to see more people getting out there from different backgrounds, sort of across the board, and also to sort of see recreation continue to play a bigger role in or leveraging outdoor recreation and trails like the Catamount Trail to broaden conservation efforts in Vermont. And a lot of these places are, we're losing forest at a pretty fast rate, and we're seeing parcelization in Vermont at a pretty fast rate as well. And so not that recreation's the only tool, and it's not appropriate everywhere, but I think we can continue to play our role in trying to protect the landscape that we all love and benefit from. So, I think it's really, for us, it's about using outdoor recreation and using backcountry skiing as a way to do more, to build community, to protect the landscape we love, to expand access and things like that.
What those guys said, absolutely. I'm right behind both Dave and Matt here. I think, accessibility is probably one of the biggest things that I expect and hope to see change. Both accessibility in terms of the type of users who might enjoy these winter recreation opportunities, but then accessibility in location, like, having these small local networks they're amazing, and trying to open up folks' eyes to the opportunities that might be close to home, not always needing to go, drive 2 hours to go recreate at a, amazing destination. Like, sure, it's easy for me to say when I live, surrounded by a recreation destination, tell people to stay close to home. But I do think that having that locally available option is going to be one of the best things that we can do to continue to grow the community and grow the advocacy that's needed. The other things that I can see happening in the next 10 years, one is slowly addressing some of our legacy trails, those trails like Dave mentioned, a trail that they had just worked on that was originally like a rake and ride type situation. And, The builders probably thought, oh, how many people will ride this in a given year? Well, I know the people who will ride it, and we might all ride it, a half dozen times, but that'll be it. And then 10 years later, you're like, how did this ever happen? There's so many people here. So, on the White Mountain National Forest, as an example, those 1,600 miles of trail, many of them suffer from poor alignments, legacy alignments. They followed an old logging road because it was easy, it was there, and the vegetation around it was thick. It's probably not the best place for a modern trail. And so making some adjustments there. And I think the support systems, like, we talked about information, we talked about information availability, signage, but I think about even kind of farther back, like transportation network. How do we get to these trails? We're seeing lots of issues with parking. How do we combat that? It's not just build more parking areas, because we know that every car that's arriving is having a negative impact on the snow that we're seeking to enjoy. So we're really seeing it in the ski industry, downhill ski industry, quite a bit. They're recognizing, hey, snowmaking has a negative impact on the environment. How can we green it? How can we make it more efficient? Grooming the snow, running a diesel snowcat is not a great thing for the environment. Can we go electric? So just looking at those support systems and how they, not only support the recreation that we're hoping for, but then how they adversely impact it as well, and what we might do to change those. So those are a couple of things I think we'll see change.
Awesome. There's a question that came in asking for resources for suggestions for like volunteer groups for trail building, particularly with things like drainage and water management. And I think that's I've got a note of that, and I can follow up with an email from this with links for some trail building recommendations. Dave, Justin, Matt, if you have some of those, after this call, if you could follow up with an email, if you have guidebooks that you recommend, like for mountain biking, I'm thinking of something like IMBA Trail Solutions. There are a lot of documents available, and we can follow this chat up when we send the link out for the video with an email. One question though, sorry, are there any, with shorter season and sort of increased demand, you talked about, Justin, that everyone in New England just sees that there's an 18-inch dump in the White Mountain National Forest, and folks are jamming the trailhead. And I don't know if there's an easy answer to this, but are there concerns about that kind of carrying capacity for both the trail and the trailheads? And do any of your organizations have a specific plan in place for dealing with those like crunch times? Are there overflow areas, or do you divert folks to other areas to recreate?
I'll go first on this one because it's something that we're actively trying to figure out how to deal with. It's been less of an issue with winter recreation, although it's certainly a winter issue as well in certain locations. We have been using, I want to say it's the International Visitor Use Management Framework, maybe not international. I know it's really stood up here in the States, but trying to look at how do you manage visitor use to protect both the natural resources, but also the social side, the experience. On the White Mountain about 10 years ago, we were concerned with overcrowding. So we were asking visitors, hey, is this, does this line up with your expectations? Is this too crowded? And overwhelmingly, people were like, no, that's fine. It's fine. And as managers, we were like, this is crazy. Like, I would not want this. But we also had to kind of check some of our own personal bias. Like when you live, in these places, when you can be there on the, quiet days, it kind of slants it a little bit. More recently, we are actually getting the responses from visitors that this is maybe, a little more than I would have liked. And people are starting to talk about permit systems, which we're reluctant to go to. But when we talk about carrying capacity, I always try and remember, there's a big difference between 10 people, 10 people that are, low skilled and not aware, and then 10 people who are super conscious of their actions and impacts. And, that doesn't mean that when you're looking out on the landscape, those 10 people are going to look any different than the other 10. But overall, there are going to be fewer user issues. There's going to be fewer resource concerns when people are educated and aware. And so I'm really hoping that education might be the silver bullet for some of these issues.
That's awesome. Dave or Matt, anything you want to quickly add to that? Or
No, I'll just say it's a struggle for us too. We are addressing it or trying to, but it's tricky, and I think it's particularly challenging in the winter context in that it really is a product of big snow days on weekends, and so it's the Saturdays that are sunny when it snowed late in the week, and things look good, and that only happens a few times a year. And so it becomes a really tricky balance. Like, how much do you invest in a parking lot to handle, and to have capacity to handle those days that you're only going to see a handful of times a year? And what's the balance there? And that sort of varies depending on the location for us and the partners involved and the sort of opportunities at the site and all those sorts of things. But it's certainly become an increasing challenge over the last few years that we're trying to figure out and learn from others as well, because it's a hard balance to strike sometimes.
Yeah, we're have those days when everything lines up and the conditions are great and the grooming's awesome and everybody's grabbing their fat bike and heading out on the trails, and it's awesome to see. Our main parking lot on the town side of our trail system is really small. I mean, it literally 12 cars, Joe, you think, maybe something like that. So we do have some collaboration with another landowner that has a snow machine repair business, motorcycle business. He allows us to use his parking lot. Also Parks and Rec in our town, so we reached out to them, and we have on our map overflow parking down there. But last year, purely by accident, we were never grooming what we called the backside of our trail system, but we had a new trail going up to the top, and for one of our events, we run a fat bike poker run event. We decided to actually groom from there too, so we actually opened up that parking lot up there, and that really helped out. So folks like myself, who I don't like showing up to a parking lot just absolutely overcrammed with people, that's just not my gig. I'm going to go to the quiet place on the backside, and and it kind of seems that out. So our solution is just trying to spread people out as much as possible, so they're not stepping on each other's toes. And then also the education part of it, just proper etiquette. Don't pull your full-size rig in there sideways, and pull out the awning and start the campfire. Just those things like that. So that's kind of our approach: education and spread people out.
awesome. Well, listen, I want to thank you all. I could sit here and talk about trails-based recreation and thinking about winter and snow all day. This has been an awesome conversation. It's a great feedback from folks watching. And I want to thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our attendees for joining the webinar today. And there will be an evaluation that follows. I'd love you to see that link in the chat here. You'll also receive a follow-up email, including a link to the evaluation, the recording of the webinar, and links to future webinars. On that note, the next webinar is January 17th from our Forest Economy program. The topic is the carbon accounting of modern wood heat. And again, February 13th, we have one to the moon, planning for the 2024 eclipse, which if you aren't aware, is going to be a big deal. Hopefully, we're hoping for a clear day in April to see kind of a pretty special event here. Anyway, we'll discuss how communities have been preparing for a major influx of visitors and talk about programming for residents. And if you'd like to be aware of other center work or webinar information, subscribe to our news digest. The link is in the chat. And again, thank you all so much. Have a great day. Greatly appreciate your time.